This video will be part 2 of the video series on this Heavy Duty Accu-Slice system. In this video, we'll be cutting some longer and some wider boards to test out the accuracy and precision of the system and see how well it does on slicing these longer boards. Since the last video, I made a few changes to the system. The first change was cutting out a section of this front plate to make it easier to turn the knob on the indexer. This plate was a little bit in the way, and we figured it'd get in the way when you're trying to turn the knob. So I just put this back on my mill and I cut a small section out of it just to make it easier to turn it, that the plate doesn't get in the way of your fingers. The other change I made was because of a customer who responded to my last video on the Heavy Duty Accu-Slice system. An individual named Sacha Schnauzer recommended putting brushes on the end of the carriage to prevent sawdust from getting into the roller bearings. I thought that was a great idea, and I made some brushes from some material I had in stock. This is a brush I used for another project, and I just cut off some like maybe 3/4 inch wide pieces of this, and I put them on the end of the carriage. And I put them on there just temporarily. I actually put these on with some crazy glue, some CA glue, just to hold them in place to see how they work. And if it does work, I'll make something more permanent in the future. I just put these on one of my carriages. I'll probably be using two 30-inch Accu-Slice 2 carriages for this video, because I want to support my long boards, and with two 30-inch carriages I can run boards up to 6-7 foot long. So I put these brushes on one of the carriages. I did not put them on the other because I want to compare the difference and see how it works. So we'll be testing that going forward. But I said the main purpose of this video is to see how well we do slicing some of these longer boards. And right now I have 3 boards I'm thinking of doing. I'm starting with a 5 foot, a 6 foot, and maybe a 7 foot. We'll see how it goes cutting these boards. I also had to make a major change to my system. I had to move some equipment around. I added first of all, I have a 6 foot rail on my system. And to that rail I added 2 4-foot extensions, one on each end. So I have 14 feet of rail for this system. In order to fit this in my shop, I had to move some equipment. I had to move out my board sander from the system. I had to move my bandsaw down a little bit more just to create room. So I got 14 feet of space here. And in the future, this space will contain this bandsaw, my new Hammer 4400 bandsaw, and also I got to put my board sander back in place. So I won't have all this room in the future. I had to make a lot of room here just to get this to fit. But it should be able to do. And theoretically, with this setup with a 6 foot rail and 2 extensions, I can cut boards up to 7 foot long. So we'll see how it goes. I did make a couple other changes in setting the system up. The first thing I did, I spent a good bit of time trying to figure out where vibration and noise is coming from when you're running your bandsaw blade. And you've probably seen this in the past as you're running a blade, and where the weld is, you keep hearing this clunk clunk noise. It's very minor, but you do hear it, and that little clunking can cause vibration. And I'm always trying to minimize vibration to give me smoother cuts. So I said I spent some good time working on this. First of all, I took my bandsaw blade, and where the weld is, I cleaned it up a little bit. I took a stone and honed the back edge and honed the sides a little bit just to make sure it was perfectly straight, to minimize that bump there. The Timberwolf does a pretty good job welding these blades, but they're pretty good. But I still get a little bit of a clunking noise. The other thing I did, I took a piece of paper. This is just a piece of a small paper, which is about 2,000 inch thick, and I put it around the blade, and then I adjusted my blade guides just to give me that little bit of clearance. So I made me 2,000 inch clearance on both sides of my blade guide, so it doesn't quite touch the blade. We'll see how that works. I might lose a little bit of precision in cutting making my boards perfectly straight all the time and not in parallel one end to the other. But we'll see how it works. But now that blade has a little bit of clearance from my ceramic blade guide, so we'll see how that works. Now the back ceramic blade guide, you want touching the blade. If that back ceramic guide is not touching the blade, what can happen as you start pushing your board in, it'll move the blade back and then it'll start twisting the blade. So by keeping that back guide, whether it's a ceramic blade guide or one of these stainless steel roller bearing guides, you actually want it touching the back of the edge of the blade. So when you push in, the blade doesn't move, because when the blade moves in, it'll also twist, and that'll give you blade drift issues. So that back edge must be touching the blade. But the side ones now have maybe 1 or 2,000 inch clearance, so it's not quite touching. And it runs smooth. You see it doesn't grind or touch it all going through. So hopefully those changes make some improvement to the system. The other thing I did with the system, when I was setting it up for the previous video and I was cutting some boards, I noticed my table wasn't perpendicular to the bandsaw blade. Because what had happened, my table was perpendicular to the bandsaw blade, but when I was adjusting these legs, I actually raised this back edge a little too much. So my table now was tilted a little bit. So I went back this time and I made my bandsaw table perfectly perpendicular to my bandsaw blade. And then I adjusted my Accu-Slice system using my 4 posts that it maintained its being perpendicular to the bandsaw blade. I want it clearing so it doesn't scrape on the table, but at the same time I want it perpendicular to the bandsaw blade. And that just meant maybe lowering these front legs a little bit and raising the back ones a little bit so everything was perfectly parallel to this table. And you can see that if you look underneath the table, I can actually see that everything was square. I have a little bit of a clearance, maybe 10,000 clearance, maybe 15,000 clearance between my tables on the Accu-Slice system and my bandsaw table, but everything is perpendicular to the blade now, and everything runs smooth. And setting up this system, now I added 2 4-foot extensions to my 6-foot carriage, and I had to go out and buy a new one of these roller bearings to support the ends, because you do want to support the ends of these longer rails. Anytime you do a rail over usually 6 foot long, you need to support that rail so it doesn't sag on you, especially when you get a heavy board on it. And I'll be cutting some fairly heavy boards. The next part is to start cutting some boards. I have 3 boards I'll be trying. I have a 50-inch board, 5 foot long. I have a 6 foot long, and I have a 7 foot long board. So we'll be testing those to see how accurate the system is cutting these longer boards. Here's my first board I'm cutting. This is a piece of maple. It's 2 inches square by 60 inches long. And I mounted it to a piece of 3/4 inch plywood, which is a little over 5 foot long. I actually glued it onto the sacrificial fence. I didn't have a piece of MDF this size, so I'm using plywood instead. So next, let me go mount this to my carriages. And I'm going to use 2 carriages to mount this, so it'll span both carriages. So let me go and do that next. I have my maple board attached to 2 30-inch carriages. And this is the longest board I ever cut on the Accu-Slice system. On our standard Accu-Slice system, I don't recommend cutting boards over 48 inches long. And it's really because of the indexing system and the strength of the table. The table is, usually only like 22 inches long. A lot of friction between the Accu-Slice table and the bandsaw table. And this small index, is only like 1 inch wide. And that's a lot of twisting motion that causes it not to be accurate. So we just don't like cutting boards over 50 inches long with the standard Accu-Slice system. But this system, since I've reduced the friction between the bandsaw table and the Accu-Slice system with these adjustable legs, the system rides much smoother with these larger guide bars. It should be doable, so we'll give it a try. So I have the system all set up now. I just check it rides freely the whole distance. This board is 60 inches long, and again, as always, the slower you cut, the smoother it cuts. So this is going to take me quite a while to cut each piece of wood. So let me time it as I'm cutting, and we'll see how it goes. But well, that worked pretty good. I cut 6 boards. I set my setting each time at 25/1000 of an inch. The strips all look nice, straight and parallel. It's a little coarse of a cut. Normally on a board like this I'd use an 8 or maybe even a 10 teeth per inch blade. Especially with maple I could use a 10 teeth per inch blade. So this is a little bit coarser cut than normal. Definitely see the saw mark. But at least they're all nice and straight. Let's see how we look on measurements. Let's just check end to end, see how we do on a board. I took measurements on a single strip that I'd cut, and I measured at different places along its entire length. So that's like 26 thousandths plus or minus 1/1000 of an inch end to end. That's pretty good. Let's see how we compare from one board to the next. And I'll measure the same position in each board as they've been in the past. When measuring each of the boards, they varied in thickness between 25 thousandths of an inch thick and 27 thousandths of an inch thick. This next board I'll be cutting is a piece of poplar. which is 6 inches wide by 6 foot long by almost 2 inches thick. The board has an interesting history. I purchased this board probably at least 50 years ago. I was making a new dining room set for my house, and I actually went to a sawmill and I bought the whole truckload, in fact 2 truckloads of this poplar, and I made a bunch of furniture, including my dining room set out of it. And this is one of the last 2-inch thick piece of that poplar that's left. And it's been used several times for shelving and other projects, but I'll cut off some thin slices of this and see how it works. So we mount this to the carriages and we'll get ready to start cutting. It's pretty heavy, but it slides fairly smoothly the entire length. And that board came out nice. I cut this 50,000 inch thick, and it actually measures, this poplar board measured between 50 thousandths and 54 thousandths of an inch in thickness, its entire length. I did see significant vibration on the ends of both rails as I was cutting this board, and this vibration resulted in a very rough board finish with very noticeable bandsaw blade marks on the finish. We will address this vibration problem later in this video. These brushes did work very well. Actually, the top of the plate here, there's no sawdust there. But it did come loose because I just put it on with some CA glue. So I need to generate something more permanent, something to screw them out. So I'll be doing that in the future, but they do work great. Well, this next board's a piece of cherry. It's 7 foot long, 6 inches wide, 2 inches thick. And that's a lot of weight to put on this system. I'm not sure it can handle it, but we'll give it a try. But that's the biggest board I've ever imagined cutting on this system. Yes, as I was pushing that through the board, I saw a lot of rocking in these carriages. I mean, there was a lot of stress on the system. As I was cutting this long and heavy cherry board, I saw a lot of rocking of the carriage and excessive vibration on both ends of the 14-foot rail. The sliced cherry board measured between 110 thousandths and 125 thousandths inch thick, much more variation in thickness and accuracy than I would normally expect from the Accu-Slice system. The surface finish of the cut boards was very rough, with significant bandsaw blade marks. At this point, I discontinued my testing to determine the source of the vibration problems and determine what can be done to correct this problem to get smoother cuts. In the previous video, we were cutting some long boards, 5, 6, and 7 foot long, and we experienced a lot of vibration in the system, and that resulted in some poor cuts. And I attributed this vibration due to the rails extending out so far, and as a result getting a lot of vibration into the rails. Whenever you have vibration of the bandsaw and then a rail sticking out, 6-7 feet, that vibration gets amplified at the end of the rail, and that's what I was seeing. So I made a few changes to improve that to get some better cuts. And I made a few other changes to the system too. But first of all, we'll talk about the rail support. In a previous video, we used these roller systems to support the rail. And that didn't do too good of a job. It still got a lot of vibration with the system. So I actually went and purchased 2 stands. These stands are normally used to support grinding wheels or buffing wheels. And they have a large plate on the top, which is about 6 inches square. And I use that to support the rail. But not just to support the rail, I also made a plate such that this plate screws to the rail. And then the plate has a mag jig clamp on it that actually clamps it to the support table. And that gives you very strong support for the system. This is the new support for the end of the rail. I said this is normally a stand that's used to support either a grinding wheel or a buffing wheel. And it has actually holes in it to mount the motor to this plate. But it's about, I guess it's about 8-inch square plate on top of this. And then I took a piece of Delrin, a 6 by 6 inch piece of Delrin, and I drilled holes in it, and I mount this Delrin plate to my rail. It's actually screwed into the rail, so it's permanently attached to the rail. And then I drill a hole, or cut a hole in this plate for a mag jig clamp. So this mag jig clamp then will clamp to this table. But you see this plate is permanently mounted to the rail. And this mag jig clamp goes through that it'll clamp onto this metal plate. And when I do that, when I turn this clamp, tighten it up, I mean that rail is permanently reduces the vibration a lot. So this is much better than the rollers that I used previously. And I put these on both ends of the rail. And it's about 20 inches from the end of the rail. The other change I made is I improved these brushes for the system. In the previous system I had these brushes on there, which were just a small piece of brush with a metal plate on it. And I actually used some CA glue to glue this to the bottom of the carriage. And a couple of those broke loose. They didn't hold too well. So I made some new jigs. These are actually made with a metal aluminum block that screws into the top of the carriage, and then the brush keeps the sawdust from getting into the roller bearings. So this combination of using these brushes plus offsetting this rail like I showed in the previous video all work to minimizing getting sawdust into the roller bearings. So 95–98% of the sawdust now is prevented from getting into the roller bearings. But anybody at the shop knows that sawdust gets every place. So some still will get in there, but a very, very minor part. And that had created a problem in the past that sawdust gets into those roller bearings and clogs them up. And if you don't clean those regularly, they'll crack on you. But this solves the problem pretty well. These are new brushes to clean off the end of the rail. And you see my carriage goes down to my bandsaw table. This rail is about 3/4 of an inch from the end of the table, and then this brush fills that gap. And as the board is pushed through there, you can see it'll push the sawdust off, keep it from going into the roller bearing. So that works pretty well. Again, it's made out of this block of aluminum, which screws into the end of the carriage, and then this brush is screwed into the end of that plate. The rail on this Heavy Duty Accu-Slice system is quite long. It's extending out 7 foot on each side of the bandsaw blade. There's a lot of rail to be moved by the system. And the system does slide quite freely on the system. Got a little movement in the rail as I'm moving it. But it seems to work pretty well. And in addition, the system rides on the rail quite nicely with my board. So this board I'm looking at right now is 5 foot long. It's a piece of maple, about 2 inches tall. Right now it's about 1 inch wide. And I'll be cutting some slices off this just to test out the system. The other change I made, I changed back to a 8/10 per inch blade. A 6/10 per inch blade gave me a pretty coarse cut. This 8/10 per inch blade should give a better cut. So we'll be doing that test next. So as always, my first thing to do is to push the board till it touches the bandsaw blade. Lock it in place. And then we'll do a cut. So I'm going to lock my clamps on the table. And then I'm going to advance this 1 full turn, which is 50 thousandths for the curve of the blade. And let's do another 50 thousandths. That's the initial cut. And then we lock the mag jig clamps. Now I have 2 more mag jigs to clamp. I have to clamp the rail on the end of the rail. So I have my system back here, and I have to lock that clamp. So that locks this rail now to my support. So it doesn't move, and the vibration should be minimized. So you do that on both ends. So hopefully that should improve the rigidity of the system and give me some better cuts. So let's go ahead and make this first cut and we'll see what it looks like. It's definitely a much improved system. I saw no vibration of any significance on my ends of my rails. Switching it at 10/10 per inch blade definitely gave a smoother cut. That's a glue surface now, so that's really good. And that came out good. I just measured it and I got 52 to 53 thousandths of an inch the entire length on both sides. And I think you can see the surface on that, but the surface is quite smooth. So that worked good, adding those new supports at the end of the rails and locking them down with the mag-G clamps definitely improved the performance. It eliminated vibration of the end of the rails and gave better cuts as a result. Okay, this next board is a piece of poplar. This board is 6 foot long, it's 6 inches tall, and about 1.5 inches thick. Probably weighs about 25 to 30 pounds, so it's quite a bit of weight. But I just pushed the board against the bandsaw blade, and then I advanced it 50,000th of an inch to cut a board. And so I lock on my mag-G clamps, all 3 of them, or all 4 of them rather. And I got between 49 and 51 thousandths in the end when I measured that. It came out real nice and the finish is really smooth. So again, that was a board that was 6 foot long, 6 inches wide, cut with a 1/8 per inch blade. So adding those supports into the rail and with the mag-G clamps to clamp it in place definitely made a major improvement in the rigidity of the system. I developed the Accu-Slice system about 7 years ago because I was making some furniture and I wanted some veneer. And I could have used this, 7, 8 years ago. I'm making a entertainment center. It was all out of cherry. I wanted some 16th inch veneer to put on the sides. This would have been perfect for that. So again, let's cut a board 100,000 inch thick, which will be 3 turns of the wheel. Okay, that's good. It measured 100 thousandths plus or minus 2, end to end, top to bottom. So that's a nice finish on that. And you can even see the edge, to show. It's perfectly straight the entire length. Okay, this last board is my cherry board, which is 7 foot 3 inches long, 6 inches tall, and about 1.25 inches thick. So let me cut a piece of scrap off first, and then I'll cut a board 100,000 inch thick off of this. Okay, that board came out really nice and smooth. See the surface on that? Actually, the other side is what I ran yesterday with the 16th per inch blade where I had the vibration. And probably you can see there's a fair amount of glue marks in there. But by using those legs or rail supports and finer tooth blade, a big difference. So that's a nice smooth surface. I had a little bit of vibration on this because this is a big piece of wood. This wood is probably at least 35, 40 pounds. And I have a 14-foot rail. It's a lot of weight for the system. This is probably pushing the limits of the system. I definitely wouldn't go any bigger than this, and maybe 6 foot's a good length to satisfy as a maximum length. Pushing 7 foot is pushing the system, I think. But we'll give it a try here and see how it works. measured that end to end, and it was between 100 thousandths and 104 thousandths end to end. And same thing on the bottom. That's a really nice board. This concludes this video on testing this Heavy Duty Accu-Slice system, cutting longer and wider boards. It worked quite well with the improvements I made to the system. The improvements I made included adding these support legs for the Heavy Duty Accu-Slice system. That enables the system to move back and forth quite smoothly and evenly on the table and not drag on the bandsaw table. So you get a nice smooth movement of the system. The other changes were adding these leg supports for the end of the carriage, or the rails. And again, that reduced vibration. Vibration gets amplified. When you have the bandsaw, have a little bit of vibration. By the time you get out, 6 foot the end of a rail, that vibration actually amplifies itself. So adding those supports to the end of the rail reduced that vibration, definitely worked better and gave me much better cuts. So in this video we ran a couple of boards. I ran this piece of maple, which is about 1.5 inches tall. Again, this was 5 foot long, and I cut a bunch of strips, and they were accurate within, plus or minus 2/1000 of an inch end to end. Then I cut a piece of poplar. This poplar board was 6 foot long, 6 inches wide, and again I cut boards between 50 and 100,000 inch thick, and got nice smooth cuts with parallelism the entire length of the board within 2/1000 of an inch. And then the final board we cut was this cherry board, which was actually 7 foot 3 inches long, and I cut 2 boards, one 50,000 inch thick and one 100,000 inch thick. And again, that worked quite nicely cutting this cherry board. Get nice smooth cuts using this 10 teeth per inch blade, or excuse me, 8 teeth per inch blade. And I'm quite pleased with the operation of the system. However, for most of my work, I probably limit myself to about 6 foot length boards with the system. And the reason for that is because you have a small bandsaw table here, which is 14, 16 inches wide, and you have a rail hanging off the end, 6, 7 feet. And that's a lot of rail to be supporting on this small table. And as a result, any vibration from the bandsaw table gets amplified out at the end. And the support legs help reduce that vibration, but you still get a little bit. And I was seeing some with the 7 foot board. It came out pretty good still, but I definitely saw some vibration with that. It would be much better if the rail was actually supported on a table. If you had a table, like a bench table, that ran the entire length of the rail, it would definitely be a better operation of the system. But again, when you do that, then you have additional drag on the rail when you're trying to slide it. So it's always compromising one or the other. But it worked quite well doing boards with the 6 foot long, and reasonably well on a 7 foot long board. And these brushes for the carriage and moving my rail in, 3/4 of an inch, definitely keep the roller bearings much cleaner on the Accu-Slice system. So those are all improvements that will be in this Heavy Duty Accu-Slice system, and also in the automated system. The next step will be to mount this system on my new bandsaw coming in. I have a Felder Hammer bandsaw, model 4400, coming in a couple weeks, and that's a bigger and heavier bandsaw. So I'll be putting this on that to see how it works. I would suspect that a bigger, heavier bandsaw might even get better performance. In addition, after that, then the next step will be making the Automated Accu-Slice system. The advantage of the Automated Accu-Slice system is it's automated. I can push my boards through there at a constant, even speed. You've probably seen it when you're pushing the board through. Every time you stop pushing the board or you jerk, you'll see a saw mark on your board. Now, it's minimized with the Accu-Slice system, but you do still see some minor variations. But by cutting at a slow, even pace, actually slower than I cut manually, I'll get really smooth cuts. I normally run the automated system at 10 inches per minute, and I wouldn't think of doing that manually. It'd just be too long. 10 inches a minute would take me, 10 minutes to cut a board like this. That's a long time to be cutting a board. You just don't have the patience to cut at that speed. When you're doing it automated with an automated system, it's easy to do. So we'll be doing that and developing that in the near future. This manual system, we are considering making a commercial product. They will be custom made one at a time. I'll be posting some pages on our website describing the system and with pricing. The lead time will probably be 4 to 6 weeks because they will be custom made as I get orders. but that will be a future product being available. It's significantly more expensive than our normal Accu-Slice system, but for applications, such as cutting longer wider boards, somebody who's a luthier might actually prefer this system because you're cutting luthier boards that are 6, 8 inches tall, 40 inches long. This will definitely work better than our standard Accu-Slice system. So those will be available in the near future. And with both the manual system and the automated system, we'll be offering these brushes. These brushes don't work on our standard Accu-Slice system because the rail is in the wrong position. They will be available in both this Heavy Duty Accu-Slice system and our automated system. These legs also only be available on this Heavy Duty Accu-Slice system and our automated system. Once again, I want to thank you for watching this video. If you have any questions or concerns or comments, as always, please give us a call or drop us an email. We're always happy to hear from you.